All right, are we missing anyone? I should note that Carson, Liquidity Wizard, is not going to be joining us today because he has a previous family obligation that he has to attend to. So it's just going to be the gang. Dan, are you recording?
Is Craig, the other Craig in here? Yes. Yeah, we're recording.
Okay, cool. I guess we'll just get started then. There's some questions that we have and some other stuff that we're going to address. The first thing I want to mention is that Tracer is migrating to, or I guess consolidating is another word, into the Mycelium token, the MYC token. So we're in the process of scheduling an AMA with them early next week. It's likely going to be Monday or Tuesday. The second we get confirmation, we will let everyone know and then hopefully give you some more information about what's going to happen with that reactor, etc. Which I think can probably lead us into our first question, which is TracerDAO's TCR token is transitioning into a new Mycelium token, 1-for-1. The move has already started and was wondering if the new Mycelium token would be supported in a new liquidity pool instead of Tracer.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, we've been in touch now closely lately during this transition with the Tracer team, or like now Mycelium team, or however you want to put this. And we're with them like right now, like kind of trying to determine what the best way forward is in order to like keep supporting them. And I'm sure that yeah, something will come out of this. Yeah, and then as Connor mentioned, for everyone that may have TCR deposited in there or might just be generally interested in what's going on with them and what that means, there will be this AMA. Just a quick reminder, so for everyone that wants to potentially, like as soon as possible, partake in this like migration or like one-to-one exchange from TCR into MYC, don't forget to put in your request for withdrawal before the rollover for the next rollover. That's the only kind of reminder that I would put out there.
That's a good reminder. Thank you. The next question is it possible there will be a conversion to curve similar to the Uni Sushi converter? So I can answer that. So that migration, converting Uni LP to Sushi LP, that was something that was made by the Sushi team back in the day when they were encouraging migration LPs to easily come over to Sushi. So that's not something that we built, obviously. There's definitely some, I would imagine, complications in being able to easily convert an SLP into a curve LP. Obviously, I'm not the most technical person, so I can't speak to the full ease of that technical process, but I just intuitively could probably say that because adding liquidity on curve is not your average liquidity add similar to Uni or Sushi. I mean, there's different ways to do it other than just adding 50-50 of each pair. That probably complicates things. And then, of course, if you're going to take advantage of the convex boost, that's an additional step that would need to be done anyways. So I don't think that that's probably something that's likely, but happy to ask our devs about it. Right now, I guess that's another good thing to mention is Cody, one of our main devs this week, has been on a much needed vacation. So he'll be back early next week. And then Sam, one of our other devs, the reason they're not on the call is he's out today on a quick weekend trip. So yep, that's the answer to that. Next question is from Reggie, asking about an update on Core 3. Any specifics? This is our favorite question. Craig, do you have any insight into updates you want to give?
Yeah, I can give some context around this. I think maybe a good way to start is one of the things we've been talking about, I think, on recent calls is Tokemak's focus on understanding and developing models around the profitability of different types of assets that are deployed into different AMM structures. And the reason for that is that, I think, pretty straightforward. The more profitable our deployments, the stronger position Tokemak is in, the better position we're in to help our current Reactor partners, and then ultimately the better position we're in to serve as a generalized liquidity solution for the whole space. And this exploration feeds into a lot of different parts of Tokemak. One of them is the Core 3 spin-up. We love all of the Core 3 reactors, of course. There's also some assets in there that are quite early in their liquidity maturation, so to speak. And so we're continuing to discuss different models with our Core 3 winners to try and spin them up in a way that we feel is good for Tokemak and sustainable and ultimately good for the space. So I think those conversations, a nice way to characterize them is they're ongoing and they're productive, and I think we're making progress, and hopefully we'll be able to settle on some models everybody's comfortable with and happy with soon. I think the ones that are kind of furthest along in this exploration are Rook and Silo, and hopefully what we'll see here is we'll be able to announce some specifics about ways we're moving forward before too long. Happy to share more there too, but I think that's a pretty good high-level look at where things are.
Cool. Thanks, Craig. Next question. Update on ACC Toka. Level of confidence of a September launch, or are we looking for October?
Yeah, I can take this. So I'm like, there's no like specific like kind of technical blockers that we're looking at right now. So that being said, we're still like exploring some aspects of it in more detail, especially like currently, and this goes into kind of a lot of aspects that I think there's a later question that this goes a little bit into as well. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. So these explorations, depending on what we determine there, might change the specs a little bit to some extent, right? Which goes into like a lot of questions. Also like over the general like architecture, there was like talking about the possibility of getting like more of those stuff onto L1, right? So overall, like I said, like no, I'm not aware of any like bigger blockers at the moment. But yeah, I think as this time comes like closer, we'll be able to give like a more specific time frame.
Yeah, and that possibility of moving more things to L1, it could bring up some really cool advantages, such as improved composability, which has hindered us a little bit in the past. And these requirements are ongoing discussion that might still be subject to change there, but as Bruno said, no major blockers.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Another question from Reggie. Does the upcoming ETH merge change how Tokemak will deploy liquidity, or is it business as usual?
So I'll give a very quick brief answer to that because we'll talk about the ETH merge in a little bit. But the very short answer is it does not like have any direct implications on the operations for us. But that being said, we'll talk about this in the, I think, very next question, actually. There, we can go into a little bit more detail as to what our plans are here.
Okay, cool. And that next question is, anything you can share that is on the horizon outside of ACC Token? if anything?
Yeah, I think Manuel will have a lot to say about this. But I think there's like 2 to 3 big topics. One of them is the staking derivatives, and the other one is CRV USD. So Manuel, if you want to.
Yeah, so let's discuss a little bit staking derivatives and the implications for the merge. Like obviously, I think that everyone is aware that there is every economic incentive to start to support staking derivatives instead of ETH. And you'll have this competition for this new risk-free rate of DeFi, where essentially, if you are a protocol trying to attract ETH, you'll need to pay a premium above the staking yield. So something that we are trying to set up, and we are having ongoing conversations with these staking derivatives protocols, is the possibility of including staking derivatives for our deployments, and that would severely improve our position in terms of start this replacement earlier. So I'm sure that we have already mentioned the experimental reactors, but we will start to conduct in the future some of these deployments to see if it's feasible.
Sharp, could you remind people what you mean by experimental reactors, maybe?
So basically, and Bruno can also chime in here, we require metrics for most of these new deployments, and we want to explore these new possibilities with staking derivatives. So it will be analytical approach of just seeing what's the profitability of those reactors, what's the demand for these staking derivatives, and what other incentives can be provided. So without going into much depth into the current strategies that we are considering, the current developments that we've seen from the balancer side, where they realized that swap fees for them weren't major impacts in terms of their revenue, and they started to take a cut over the yield of yield-bearing assets. This is something that Tokemak can also use to its advantage, and further along the line, using also staking derivatives on this vertical can further improve our conditions. There will be more developments from the Balancer Labs side, and I think that within maybe 1 month, we'll have more things to discuss on this regard.
And I also might add to the to this idea of like the experimental reactors that will like initially like use this to like kind of gauge these things from a like kind of analytical perspective, but this might also be a very like kind of useful way to like from a protocol perspective to like segue into these more how we initially like framed it, like these permissionless reactors, or like kind of these from the community like kind of driven spin up of reactors.
Exactly. And another cool thing about the eventual support, if all goes well, of staking derivatives is that in terms of IL considerations, it won't be much different from a deployment with ETH, right? So the other consideration is always, well, what is the demand for this new type of pair asset? Is there a demand for it? Can that initially be subsidized with external incentives? And all of that goes into the framework that we are exploring and all the new changes that the merge will introduce into the DeFi ecosystem itself. And this whole concept of using the native yield from ETH as a risk-free rate has a lot of implications. And even if we suppose that a lot of people will just start to stake that ETH, and that will bring the APR down, the DeFi protocols would still benefit from just replace some of those pairs and provide less incentives because you are already supporting the staking derivative itself. So you'd provide those incentives on top of the native yield that the underlying derivative would accrue.
Sweet. And is there anything you want to tease about your particular excitement regarding CRV USD?
Well, it's one of the things that I'm most excited about in DeFi, and I think that this is a great opportunity to also discuss the recent events that we've seen in terms of all the blacklists regarding USDC and the need for decentralized stablecoins. But to keep it short, we currently have a good exposure to CRV, right? And the only thing that you can consider as real yield within CRV itself is the 3CRV revenue distribution. And as we know, all of that revenue distribution is currently derived exclusively from swap fees. So I usually say that there are two major pillars within this DeFi economy, and it all stems out of speculation as it stands. So you have swap fees and you have demand for leverage. Right now, Curve is conquering this full vertical. So they are focused on the swap fees, and now they will also have revenue from liquidation penalties and additionally the interest rates. And that's something that will essentially be priced out in the new 3CRV revenue distribution, which hopefully we'll see more incentives to distribute it directly in CRV USD. But on a personal level, I'm very eager to use part of my ETH holdings to just deploy some of that liquidity to pools paired with staking derivatives, and then use those LP tokens from Curve to deposit them on Convex, and then use those tokens from Convex to essentially collateralize CRV USD and farm with CRV USD. So there are a lot of loops that we could explore here, and this is more for individual strategies. But just to mention that Tokemak is also prepared to have exposure to it. And at a protocol level, we have plenty of ideas on how we can use this to our advantage.
Awesome. Okay, moving on a bit. Is there anything, before I get to this next question, is there anything else about, I think maybe one thing I can mention, Craig, maybe you can chime in. Still early days for our UI revamp, but I'm happy to say that there's some really good progress being made, and there's still no true timeline on when the full revamp would be complete, but we're going through some really interesting iterations right now, and I think it's looking pretty cool. I think people.
Yeah, the stuff that I've seen this morning is kind of so this morning, just I think I can say that much. Like the front end kind of designer, he offered up this morning like a couple of like options kind of for the UI, like kind of which direction this should go for us to like kind of just look at and evaluate. And I thought they all look insane. So yeah, very excited about this.
There's some sweet looking trade-offs that Victor is making in that. So we got a couple of things before these become reality for everybody on this call, although maybe we'll send some sneak peeks out as we get close. There's some very core UI, UX that Victor's working on that we kind of have a clear sightline on and clear trade-offs, although Victor's amazing at providing different visual treatments to different UX flows. So I'm sure we'll continue to iterate on that. Some of the other things that we talk about on this call will also affect what needs to be surfaced in the UI and the different kinds of user interactions people will need to have within that. So I think those are some of the unknowns that will find their way into the roadmap as we start to learn more. That will include some of the kind of final things on ACC Toka and other kind of different ways and different places that either experimental reactors or new voting venues and how voting works ultimately are implemented. So as End says, we're continuing to move forward. We'll find the right place to roll out the right updates, and this will be in part a UX UI update, and in part it will reflect updates to the overall protocol, which all of which are super exciting.
Yeah, this is, you bring up a good point, because like with this like UI UX update, right? There's a lot of kind of things that will probably that are not right now on the map of exactly like what we want in there, but like there's additional points in there, right? Like me and Manuel have been talking a lot lately also about like kind of ways to align better like kind of the different players, like the different LDs, for example, right? Like there's different types of LDs. And there's I think there's ways where we could like align the different like motivations for which someone could potentially like vote for certain reactors, right? Which would also require to give the LDs more like a little more information in order like for example pertaining to like risk in order to yeah, to align to for them to like be able to like make informed choices on those specific reactors. You want to add something there, Manuel?
Yeah, like overall, being focused on the sustainability of the protocol implies being focused on revenue. So it's not enough to severely decrease our emissions, which is something that we have been doing in the past, but we also need to be able to align these interests and incentivize LDs to vote on what's beneficial for the protocol itself. So this next chapter, as we've previously mentioned, it will be very much focused on sustainability, and that additional information will be required to make decisions that are good for the overall state of the system.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Any other protocol updates anybody wants to mention before I jump to the little non-Tokemak related question about the Exaverse thing?
I'll just check the channel real quick if there's any questions.
Just Reggie doing a yeehaw for the CRV USD. Oh, more detail on ETH merge. I don't know if we have much to say about that. Very excited about it.
Yeah.
I think depending on what the if there's an underlying question there, this is me as a non-dev probably wearing too much of a dev hat. There's a lot that won't change for Tokemak. We'll continue to support the proof of stake chain after the merge. If there's a lot of fragmentation and forks, you know, we'll probably be watching like everybody else to see if and what kind of chaos evolves out of it. But certainly our intention is to support the main chain, the true chain, and in our eyes, that will continue to be the proof of stake chain.
This is interesting because like Frax was one of the few protocols that I saw putting out this information, and they said specifically that they would obviously support the POS chain, and additionally they said that whatever ETH fork they received, they would just sell that and bridge it to the main chain. So it's good for protocols to also take this stance of just clearing out any doubts, which I know that seems like something that is evident, but it also dissipates some of the speculation that is currently ongoing. So this illusion that it's you buy one, you get two for free, it's not really like that. But I'll be happy to take the discount on STETH while everyone fights for forked ETH. Not financial advice.
Okay, cool. So just quick little Exaverse update. We don't have a hard date for launch yet. Our Genesis pilot collection, the art is pretty close to completion. We have some sort of internal deadline this year to try and launch that, but we're not committing to a hard date. We're announcing that yet. It's important to note, like, this is a pretty experimental project that's like kind of a labor of love from a small external to Tokemak. And we just want to make sure that we have kind of like a proper launch campaign planned. You know, like opening a Discord, having assets ready, building a community. I kind of hate like the trend of recent NFT projects where you mint something and then there's a long waiting period for the reveal, or there just isn't much else ready to go. So we want to try to avoid that and have a lot of stuff ready, like an interactive front end and preparation for the community to start participating in some lore crafting stuff. So yeah, it's just we're trying to be forward thinking about that launch and make sure it's not half-assed. And we will keep those who are excited about it updated as we have more ready to go.
I mean, I can say that we were going sort of into the unknown, and there seems to be other people landing on coming to similar conclusions that we had 6 or 8 months ago. So it looks like we did skate to the puck, and I'm feeling real good about sort of what we've built. And it's essentially just execution from here on out. But we're certainly in what seems to be an emerging category of NFT or GameFi as an industry, which I'm both tremendously relieved and happy about, because when we started doing this, we really didn't know, is this going to be where things go or not? So I'm always light on details, but when we do reveal this, there will be a lot to dig into. As En said, we're going to make a proper release. We're not going to sort of kick out some NFTs and then kind of constantly drag people along with bullshit updates. So when we do drop this thing, it will be a real product, and hope you like it.
Cool. So Peeled Cot asked, "Are there hard dates for anything?" I think it's just important to sort of reinforce that the team is solidly in build mode right now, and there's a lot on the horizon. But a lot of the big changes from ACC Toke to even the front end require a lot of iterations and making sure that once we launch something, when you launch big things like changing the front end or something like ACC Toke, it's hard to walk back. So I think that the priority is to make sure that we get things right. So the team is well on its way to all of these things, and we'll do our best to keep everybody abreast of proposed launch dates. But yeah, we're all feeling pretty optimistic about everything. So don't have any membrane updates though. Anybody else want to say anything? We're at a half hour now, so it was a shorty and a quickie. I think Liquidity Wizard will be back on the next one. But want to thank everyone for joining us again today. Really appreciate it. And we some of us are going to hang around and be in a Leaky Reactor. We're trying to do like Leaky Reactor Fridays now, since Friday seems like a more ideal night to crack a beer open rather than getting the Sunday scaries. So I'll be around in the Leaky, Dan, whoever else from the team wants to hang around.
I'll also be around, so whoever wants to chill, let me know.
Sweet. Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Talk to you soon, guys.
See ya.
Later.
Thanks, everyone.